Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Friday, the 27th of June. You're tuned in to our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Korea are knocked out of the Brazil World Cup after losing 1-0 in their final Group H game against Belgium. The European side win the group. Algeria qualify in second place after drawing 1-1 with Russia. President Park Geun-hye decides to retain Chung Hong-won as Prime Minister after her two replacement candidates withdrew their nominations. Chung offered to resign in late April to take responsibility for the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. Plus, the government files for asset seizure against the owner of the Sewol-ho ferry and several others with ties to the ship's operator. The total sought is over $395 million. But our top story this morning. In a move that caught lots of people off guard on Thursday, President Park Geun-hye decided to keep the incumbent Prime Minister after a series of nomination setbacks left a big vacuum in her envisioned state reform drive. Our Choi You-sun starts us off.
In a surprise announcement on Thursday, the presidential office said President Park had rejected Prime Minister Chung Hong-won's previous offer to resign and asked him to continue working for the nation with a sense of duty. Prime Minister Chung had expressed a wish to step down in the wake of the Sewol-ho ferry accident 2 months ago. It is the first time in Korea's constitutional history that a prime minister will be staying on after rendering a resignation. The presidential press secretary said President Park, who has promised a massive restructuring of the government and a bolstering of the national safety system following April's ferry tragedy, went through great pains before making the latest decision.
The administrative vacuum and division of public opinion intensified due to the previous nominations. The president has decided the situation can no longer be left alone.
In regards to the presidential office's personnel verification system, which has been heavily criticized after the recent back-to-back nominee withdrawals, a new senior secretary will be put in charge of finding people to fill positions and verifying their credentials. Upon Thursday's announcement, the Prime Minister vowed to pour all his energy into correcting irregularities in Korean society and making the country a safer place to live. He also said when necessary, he would not hesitate to offer his views to the president on state matters. The ruling party said the president's decision was understandable and that she had put a priority on minimizing the administrative vacuum and moving forward with the running of state affairs. The main opposition, on the other hand, criticized the administration for failing to meet the people's expectations to reform Korean society in the aftermath of the ferry disaster. Choi You-sun, ARIRANG News.
Now, the two Koreas failed to make much progress at all, really, during talks Thursday on ways to improve the passage system and internet services at their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. Our Hwang Sang-hee has this report.
For the first time in 6 months, officials from the two Koreas met on Thursday to discuss matters related to their jointly run Kaesong Industrial Complex. But the meeting ended without concrete results. Key issues put forth by South Korea included the installment of internet services and the implementation of an electronic entry system to allow South Korean workers to commute freely in and out of the complex. However, North Korea wanted to discuss matters related to the wages of North Korean workers.
We could not reach a conclusion on any special issue and had different agendas in mind, but we each clearly expressed our stances.
South Korea proposed to hold their next meeting in August, but the North did not give a clear answer. The quarterly meeting of the Joint Committee of the Business Park has been at a standstill since December last year, when inter-Korean relations soured following military drills between Seoul and Washington. With some 50,000 North Koreans working for more than 120 South Korean factories, the Kaesong complex is seen as the last remaining symbol of inter-Korean cooperation. Last year, the factory zone sat idle for 5 months after North Korea unilaterally closed it down amid escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. Some had taken Thursday's talks as a sign of thawing inter-Korean ties, but it seems conditions on the peninsula will remain icy for now. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
Yes, well, relations definitely will remain icy because of this next story, because North Korea fired 3 short-range projectiles off its east coast on Thursday afternoon local time. South Korea's defense ministry says the projectiles took off from near Wonsan, a coastal town east of Pyongyang, and flew just under 200 kilometers before landing in waters between North Korea and Japan. South Korea is still trying to figure out what kind of projectiles they were and why they were fired. North Korea has test-fired several short and medium-range rockets and missiles in the past months and is threatening to conduct a new nuclear test. The South Korean government has launched the process to exercise its right of indemnity against the owner and officials connected to the sunken Sewol-ho ferry. Judicial officials said on Thursday that the government filed last Friday for the sequestration of ferry owner Yoo Byung-un's assets. The government also wants to seize the assets of the chief and 4 officials of the ferry operator Chung Hae-jin Corporation and 8 crew members. The total sought is just shy of $400 million, and this includes property, vehicles and bonds. The seized assets are intended to be used to compensate the victims and their families. More than 300 people, mostly high school students, were killed in the disaster on April 16th. The Seoul Central Court ordered the government to submit further evidence for its request. The Korean government is busy working on its budget proposals for next year with a focus on fiscal soundness. Some sectors will see their budgets cut when 2015 rolls around. Others related to the economy and safety may see a boost. Now, Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The government has cut out a larger portion of next year's budget for promoting public safety and the economy, money that may come from reduced investments in social overhead capital projects, among others. The Ministry of Strategy and Finance said the budgetary scale for 2015 is around $371 billion, up 6% from this year's budget. It's the smallest rate of increase in 5 years, mainly due to the government strengthening its budgetary rules. It implemented a pay-as-you-go system, a practice of financing new spending commitments with currently available funds. This means when ministries introduce new bills that require increased spending, the funding must come through cuts to other bills. The ministry has already requested cuts to projects related to social overhead capital and the environmental and agriculture sectors. The government also plans to cut down on the number of projects that overlap and has asked ministries and local municipalities to strengthen cooperation for efficiency. The ministry plans to finalize its budget proposal by September this year. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Staying with some economic news now, and Korean women are becoming ever more active in the workplace. In fact, they are in the workplace in record numbers now. But that doesn't necessarily mean they are enjoying a so-called gender equal or even a well-balanced working environment, as our Kwon So-ah reports.
More and more Korean women are working. A recent study shows more than half of women participated in the Korean economy last year, marking a 7-year high. And they prefer working rather than staying at home changing diapers and cooking for their kids. But this doesn't necessarily mean they enjoy their professional lives more, but rather they choose it because it equals out to less stress. In fact, 7 out of 10 moms with young children in this survey said they felt stressed when at home, citing the burden of childcare as the #1 challenge in getting a job and being able to keep it. And that's why nearly half of them wished for the expansion of private and public daycare centers in the country. Social bias is seen as the second biggest obstacle for female professionals. And such tough environment comes against the backdrop of the huge gap in the economic participation rate between men and women, as it stood at 23% last year. There is a glimpse of a trend change, however. The perception of only women bearing the responsibility of taking care of children is beginning to shift slowly, as the number of men taking paternity leave has more than doubled compared to 10 years ago, standing at 3.3% in 2013. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
And good morning to you all as we kick things off with the South Korean national football team going up against Belgium in their final group stage match. Now, needing a combination of Russia winning by 1 goal and Korea winning by 2, it was a tough task to begin with. Now, of course, Korea looking very different in this match as several changes were made, including Kim Sung-gyu in as the goalkeeper and Kim Shin-wook in as the one-top. But while the defense improved, no goals being scored in the first half. But just before the end of the first half, a straight red to Belgium's Steven Defour as the first half ends 0-0. But despite being a man down, Korean offense nowhere to be seen, while Belgium still able to score in the second half as Korea loses 1-0. Meanwhile, Russia taking on Algeria. Russia off to a great start, getting on board in the first half thanks to Alexander Kokorin, but Islam Slimani levels it in the second half as both sides end in a 1-1 draw as Belgium and Algeria move on to the round of 16. Now, as much as we don't want to admit it, many knew that Korea's last preliminary rounds match might be the last match in this year's World Cup. And to thousands of Korean fans who have stayed up all night to watch the games at home and outdoors at cheering venues, the harsh truth was disappointing. Our Shin Se-min gathered the voices of the cheering squad this morning.
Upset about losing the match against Belgium, Korean fans left the last cheering venue for the Brazil World Cup with their heads held low. Korea's elimination also spells the end to all Asian hopes in the tournament. Thousands of fans had been cheering on the streets in front of COEX in southern Seoul since early Thursday evening, some 10 hours before the kickoff. The fans, hoping a red card for Belgium in the first half would make it easier to win, couldn't hide their disappointment after the game.
I thought we had the advantage when I saw the Belgian player get a red card. I really think we could have done a better job.
Even against a Belgium team down to 10 men, the game didn't go well. The result is very regrettable. I wish there was another chance.
The fans spent all night waiting, and pre-game K-pop performances were held at the venue to keep the early birds motivated and entertained. With the fall of the national team in Brazil, some supporters are already looking ahead to the 2018 World Cup.
It's a great shame we didn't make it to the last 16. Now we'll just wait for the next World Cup in 4 years' time.
Failing to advance to the final 16, Korea will have to go again in 2018 World Cup in Russia. The fans had fun, and everyone thanks the squad for trying their best in Brazil. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
And now, of course, going into the other World Cup matches from earlier today, we had Group G all fighting for a spot in the round of 16. So let's start off by taking a look at Germany taking on the U.S. Of course, going into the match here, both sides neck and neck without any one of the teams scoring in the first half of the match. But in the second half is Thomas Müller, who scores in the 55th minute, giving Germany the 1-0 lead and the win as Germany finishes first place in Group G. Meanwhile, Portugal taking on Ghana. Portugal gets on board thanks to an own goal, but Asamoah Gyan levels it in the 57th minute. Now, Portugal needing a big margin victory here, but the final goal comes in the 80th minute as Cristiano Ronaldo scores, giving Portugal the 2-1 victory. But with the big 4-0 loss to Germany earlier on, the U.S. advanced to the next round on goal difference. And now that all the group stage matches have concluded, we now know which nations will be playing in the knockout stage. So let's take a look at the round of 16 matches we can look forward to. And of course, taking a look here, quite a matchup amongst the South American teams to kick things off, including the host nations facing off against Chile. It's been red hot this tournament. Now, Algeria, who advanced from Group H, will now face off against Germany, and Belgium faces off against the United States, who hope to continue their run. And this one should be an interesting one as well. The Netherlands squaring off against Mexico. But check this out. None of the Asian nations advancing to the next round, with none of the nations actually winning a single match. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Friday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, who's standing by for us at the News Centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Hello, Mark.
Now, Russia is under a degree of diplomatic pressure, as much as they can be, I guess, as the Ukrainian government and separatists are engaged in peace talks ahead of a looming deadline.
You're absolutely right, Mark. The ceasefire between Kiev and pro-Russia rebels in eastern Ukraine due to expire Friday morning local time. And not a lot of confidence on the ground as thousands of Ukrainians are reportedly packing up and lining up to cross into the Russian side of the border. Now, the peace talks resumed Thursday after pro-Russian separatists agreed to it. Earlier, German Chancellor Angela Merkel had engaged Russian President Vladimir Putin to discuss how to end the Ukrainian crisis via phone for a second time in 2 days. Chancellor Merkel and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry have both been urging more action from Moscow as EU leaders meet on this Friday to review their package of sanctions against Russia. Also on this Friday, President Poroshenko, whom you saw earlier, is set to sign a controversial EU association agreement, the same agreement that ousted Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych had refused to sign. Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki says he supports any Syrian airstrikes against Sunni militants, bringing the neighboring states one step closer against a common enemy. Prime Minister Maliki told the BBC this week's attacks against ISIL militants took place on the Syrian side of the Qaim border crossing, though military and rebel sources had earlier said it was carried out on Iraqi territory. He also lamented the great rebel advance, saying it could have been avoided if American air power had come quickly. He said Baghdad purchased 36 American fighter jets since the start of the crisis, but that the delivery had been, quote, slow and very long-winded. Australian authorities have announced they are shifting their search zone for missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 further south in the Indian Ocean. The area is about 1,800 kilometers west of Perth, Australia, and covers an area 70 times larger than the region already searched at more than 60,000 square kilometers. The search area was shifted following a more detailed analysis of possible airspeeds, flight paths, and the so-called pings, or digital handshakes, between Flight 370 and Inmarsat. Australian authorities also said they believe someone on board deliberately switched on the autopilot system after the Beijing-bound plane made a U-turn toward the southern Indian Ocean, where they believe it ran out of fuel and crashed. And finally, the World Health Organization will gather 11 nations to a roundtable as it calls for drastic action to counter the deadliest Ebola outbreak in history. As of Sunday, nearly 400 deaths from more than 630 cases of the deadly hemorrhagic fever was recorded across the West African states of Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Medical experts warn it could spread to even more countries. The medical charity group Doctors Without Borders this week called the outbreak, quote, out of control. The significant increase in cases comes despite the dispatch of 150 experts to Guinea following the first signs of the virus back in March.
The government plans to lift certain restrictions on electricity usage this summer, as it does not expect there to be any serious power shortages. Public and government offices, however, will remain subject to the restrictions. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said on Thursday that the country's peak power demand during the summer is estimated to reach 79 million kilowatts. The country's maximum generation capacity is 84.5 million kilowatts. That's up compared to the 77 million kilowatts last year when a number of nuclear reactors were shut down when they were found to contain parts supplied with fake safety certificates. Now, government and public offices are required to maintain room temperature at 28 degrees Celsius or above, as in previous years, but they will be given greater discretion. Commercial buildings have been required to keep their temperatures at 26 degrees Celsius in previous years, but they will now only be advised to do so. Wearable technology is the hottest new trend in the IT sector, but these special devices are now being used to create some art. And our Park Geun-hye went to an open art studio where creative ideas are being turned into reality with this new technology.
Creative collaboration among IT experts, fashion designers, and media artists on various wearable technology projects is in full swing, ranging from pure art pieces to practical ideas that can be adapted into commercial products. This individual tent, for example, will be folded into a backpack once completed so that it can serve as a wearable shelter.
Basically, the aim of this project is to create the minimal shelter in disaster area.
His team came up with the idea after visiting Jindo Auditorium during the Sewol-ho ferry disaster in April, where hundreds of suffering families of victims didn't have enough private spaces. On a much lighter note, wearable technology expert Kim Young-hee and her team are working on interesting clothes that have alcohol sensors attached to them.
We're going to have a sensor very close to your, chin and mouth. When you drink a little bit, this power shoulder will go up, and also the color of the light's going to change a little, that shows how much you're drunk.
One Japanese media art team says the key to wearable technology is establishing a feedback system between human beings and wearable devices.
This system can be used for daily life, so you can simulate anything.
He says the feedback system that wearable devices can offer to humankind will enhance people's awareness about themselves and the world, just as this video art installation visualizes the interaction between shoes and its wearer by capturing walking patterns.
We believe that our walking also tells a lot about us and our relationship with the earth that we are in and then the time we are living as well.
This open art studio is just one of many collaborative projects on wearable technology that are currently underway, a sign of growth for what may be the next big industry. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
Good morning to you. I'm Lee Ji-hyun with your weather update. Well, the humidity and the warmth continues to build today, and temperatures will be hovering near 30 degrees Celsius across the region, and the UV level will be quite strong today. So be sure to wear a good amount of sunblock and stay hydrated by drinking plenty of water, and don't forget to wear a hat or sunglasses to protect yourself from the sun. Well, while most of the regions will see strong sunshine, another round of passing showers are in store in the mountainous regions of Gangwon-do and some parts of Gyeongsang-buk-do province later in the afternoon. And for here in the capital, we have sporadic showers forecasted tomorrow, Saturday. So if you have planned for an outdoor activities, it seems like Sunday should be a better day to do it. So keep that in mind, and let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The morning low here in Seoul started out at 20, but the daytime high will rise to 29, while Daegu and Gwangju should rise to 32 and 31 respectively, and Busan should top out at 25 later in the afternoon. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like down on Jeju will only hike up to 24, while Daejeon and Dokdo should see a high of 30 and 24 respectively, and Mount Gunggang should top out at 20. Well, that's all for me at this hour. Have a wonderful day, and I will be back with more updates afternoon.
Thank you, Jian, and that's all we have for now. We'll be back with another newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.